From Roseville, right?
All right. Hi, I'm Bobbi. I grew up in Citrus Heights, so from the age of 7. And I've been a portrait artist from day one, back in probably junior, well, actually in 9 or 10, I started drawing eyes, and I was really in love with people. And so I started learning about portraits. I took all the art classes I could in high school, and of course back then they had them. So now, I didn't want to take any of those other classes. But yeah, so I really enjoyed drawing from day one. And as I progressed, I decided I wasn't good enough to become an artist, and I went to work for a computer company. And I went to make money. I needed to make money to get out of the house because I didn't want to live there anymore. And and so I started working. And so I worked for a computer company for my longest job. And at 24, I quit smoking and decided I needed something to do on my lunch hour. So I started drawing everybody's kids and dogs and friends. And at $15 a piece, I had a list of 100 waiting for my drawings back then. So within a year, I started taking an oil painting class, and I started teaching that same class a year later. So I've been teaching now since 1985. This is my 39th year. Next year, I have a big show that's going to happen at Sacramento Fine Arts Center. I rented both galleries for all my students and for myself to show in. It's been a long journey. At the age of 30, I've been teaching for 4 years already, and I quit my job, became a full-time artist because I didn't like the backstabbing corporate life. I really didn't want to be part of that, and I knew I didn't belong there. So I became a full-time artist at 30. I did not get an education from college. I was mostly self-taught. And I went through all the Renaissance painter. In the beginning, I was a Renaissance painter. I was totally into, the real, and you can see it, the influences in my dark background of portraits. So what I discovered in Sacramento was that because I grew up in Citrus Heights and I've always been in Sacramento. I just moved to Roseville. I lived at the edge of Roseville, so it's part of my domain, so, but I started, I lost that thought, sorry. Slow down. Okay, so I ended up finding the American Society of Portrait Artists back east. Well, what I was going to say is I didn't find that people wanted to share what they knew. And I was this young 30-year-old or so, 30-ish. I got involved in Northern California arts, and I sought out other portrait artists in Sacramento. There just really wasn't anybody at that time. Now that we have the influx from the Bay Area, we have a lot more talented people that have come to our area, and it's really nice. But during that time, I charged my way on a charge card to go all the way across the country to get involved with the American Society of Portrait Artists. And at the American Society of Portrait Artists, I received the most education I could have ever gotten, and it was really wonderful. I got to see Nelson Shanks and Everett Raymond Kinsler and Richard Schmid and these fantastic painters that were so great. And I learned by watching them on the one weekend a year that I would go back there. When I was there the first time, I met a lot of the talent, and I met one person by the name of Igor Babailov. And Igor is a Russian painter who, at the age of 14, was accepted into the Surikov Art Institute in Moscow. And he then left his family and went to school to be taught art there. And then he moved to Canada, and he became part of the American Society of Portrait Artists because he eventually wanted to move here, and he has been here for about 10 years. He lives on the East Coast. He's 6 years younger than me, but he was just phenomenal. I just loved what he could do, you know, you would get lost in, and I brought him out to teach my students. And so, in 95, I rented my own space on Fulton and at Fulton and Hurley. I rented my own space, my own gallery, and I would teach there. And so I started having shows and other teachers. In 97, I created Baldwin Fine Art. And Baldwin Fine Art, Baldwin Gallery. Baldwin Gallery was in Old Town Fair Oaks, and we were there for about 3 years. It was a co-op of up to 22 people. It was fantastic. I can identify with No Time to Paint, because after 3 years of doing that, and I started the nonprofit Portrait Society because I loved the people back east, and I wanted more of that in here. I wanted people to like to paint people. And so I started the West Coast Society of Portrait Artists. And from 97 to 2001, I ran both of those. And the stock market went down, and I ended up in debt. And so I had to close the gallery, and I had to step away from the Portrait Society because here I am, a self-surviving full-time artist that I needed to promote myself. So at that point, I totally turned my focus inward and stopped promoting everybody else. And I loved the gallery was some of my best years. I met some of the most wonderful people. I don't know if you know Steve Memmering, he was one of my artists there, and there's a lot of other people that were part of my gallery. It was phenomenal, but I brought back to Igor. I brought him out to teach workshops. He taught at Sacramento Fine Arts Center, and he taught at my gallery, and he was just phenomenal. I would lose my space. Like I'd be watching him, you couldn't talk while he was demonstrating. Unlike me, I talk constantly. You couldn't talk while he was demonstrating, and I had this view of his artwork and the model, and I kept looking back between them, and I'd get confused as to which was the drawing, which was the person. He was just that good. So he was a mentor for quite a few years. In 96, I was invited to go to Russia. I went with a small group of people, of 7 people, that was considered the first delegation of American artists to be invited to Russia. I was definitely the new kid on the block. I went with Steve Levine and Carl Sampson and Alan Banks. These are teachers from Cincinnati and Minnesota, and they're incredible artists. Steve Levine has been on the front of Artist Magazine many times. He also showed at the Pence Gallery in San Francisco. So I learned a lot there. I learned a lot just by being the person who was there listening, you know. So up until that point, I was all about portraits. And going back to the portrait seminars, I really learned that, you know, unless you can work from life, you really aren't doing it right. So I started working from life then at that point. So I started as a photorealist. I was definitely a Renaissance photorealist because I liked the Renaissance lighting when I got into portraits. And then I went into life painting. Well, when I went to Russia, we were supposed to go as a group of students, according to Igor in the beginning. And then we became a group, this delegation of American artists that were invited over there. And what happened was I was thrown into plein air for the first time as a professional. They thought I was. I wasn't. It was so my first view of, we were in a little town called Kolomna. We were there for 21 days, and we ate, drank, you know, thought everything was about art. It was incredible. I was about 37 at the time, and it was fabulous. So here I am with these professional Russian painters who are incredible too. And they had a show for us, and they had us put our artwork up, and I was like, really, we did do a couple of portraits there while I was there. So that one, so we showed, a lot of people over in Russia have my signature. They think I was there, they thought at the time, until the internet, right? And that I was somebody important because I was with this group of artists. It was really important. It was incredible. Let's see. So I went into starting to plein air. I went out a few times. I've never really had any formal classes other than Igor. Once I started plein air painting, everybody else was interested in it. So I have on Saturdays, I have a group that goes out. I take them out to different locations around Sacramento, and we go as far as Woodland, and this weekend we're painting downtown Roseville, but that's fairly local. We painted in Lincoln, we painted in, but mostly, we've got a Martinez. It's a different location every week within an hour of Sacramento. One of my students comes from Yuba City, another one comes from it was Wilton. And so I'm the furthest out in Roseville, so I try to get them to come together. And we went last weekend to Mendocino we painted at Mendocino. So I'm running on 10 days of working straight right now at 66 and I'm tired. Luckily yesterday I got iron in so I got my iron infusion, so I've got my mind here at least. So yeah, I have a lot of health problems. So once I got to the point of starting plein air, I never quit portrait painting. And once I was just focused on myself, I just painted as many portraits as I could. And my biggest client is Shingle Springs Miwok Band. I painted 26 portraits of their tribal elders for them. They keep them in the rancheria, in their private area to honor their, but I have photographs of a lot of those in here if you guys are interested in looking. But this represents 40 some years, and most of these are older, painting portraits. When I started working from life, when I started learning from the Portrait Society, of course, you can't have little kids pose for you, and you can't have, because they move. I did get a 5-year-old one time. When we were at the gallery, we get a different model all the time, and I got a 5-year-old, and his mama promised him Legos if he held it still. And we painted him in his pirate outfit, and that was pretty cute. I did a couple of projects that were 31 portraits in 31 days. And so the first one I did went really well. I had a show at a winery in Lodi with all of the artwork. I did 3-hour poses. Somebody came over to my studio 3 hours a day, and I did a different 18 by 24 every day in 3 hours. So that was really kind of fun. And I started a book. I was writing a book on it. And then I started to do another one. And unfortunately, I think that was 2020, right before COVID hit. But I also, I get anemic really fast because I've got a genetic disorder that makes me have nosebleeds all the time. But so I found out I was anemic at that time, and that one didn't go as well. I probably got about 24 of them out of 31 days, and that was really neat. I have a website set up. If you're on my Facebook, there's a site that's dedicated to that second project. I teach color about color theory. So I started out as this Renaissance artist, and I really loved that classical. I loved Da Vinci. I loved the masters. I really wanted to know what they knew. So I even painted myself one time. I got this thin mirror. I had my easel out, and I put a candle in the middle of it because I wanted to paint like Rembrandt. I wanted to see what he felt when he painted himself, And so, it's really hard when you can't tell the difference between burnt umber and ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson and the green, so you're painting in the dark. I did do a self-portrait from that. That was really kind of interesting. So part of what I've been asked to talk about is inspiration, right? What inspires you? I've done this for so many years. Well, in all of these periods of time that I have gone through and I was working at this, I'd have to go to the easel and get myself to want to start painting that next painting. So whatever was on my easel, one of the quickest tricks that I really tell all of my students is that you need to touch it. You need to get involved no matter what. You need to connect yourself to that painting again, so that when you come back in and you're ready to take on that project, it just kind of gets you back in the feeling of what that painting was. Sometimes we aren't supposed to touch them there, but we are. This is what it's about. We are reconnecting to our art. It's part of us and we're extending ourselves. So through the many years that I have painted, I had to go down no matter what I was going through. And I've been through a lot of drama in my life. And so there were times that I had a commission I needed to get out. How do I go down there and I get reconnected? Well, I eventually learned to turn on audiobooks because as a teacher, I'm very capable of going, okay, now I'm thinking about doing this, now I'm thinking about doing this. So I have actually both sides of my brain. I mean, how many times have you sat down and went, I could go do laundry? I can't do this. I can't do this. I should be doing laundry. I should be cleaning the kitchen. So I started turning on audiobooks, and I am like one of Audible's biggest clients, I think. So I love my audiobooks while I paint. It gives me that release from everyday thoughts, conversations I've had with people. It releases me to go paint. And so whatever your muse is, whatever your thing is, whether it's music or whatever, you really need to remove yourself from everyday life in order to be able to go in and paint. Let's see. Color theory. So I am teaching a color theory at the Rockland. I teach four classes a week. I teach the plein air class on Saturdays. That's from 8:30 till noon. And yes, we get out there when it's really cold. At Mendocino, we're all bundled up and we have fingerless gloves and we're dealing with the wind and we have our hats on. You see pictures of us hunkered down, and the dog's even wrapped in a blanket. It's a lot of fun. It is. We get out there and have a lot of fun doing it. It's like a sport. When you're out there plein air painting, if you haven't done it yet, you need to do it. It's like a sport, but it's not one that you have to run for. It's a great sport, and you get out there and have all of your equipment to handle and the elements and location and all those things. It's pretty fun. So that's one that I teach. I have taught for proper art. I've taught for plaster schools for adults. I knew a lot of people. In fact, they kept trying to get me out here, and I finally am teaching at Lincoln. So I had several people come back to my classes after years of being away from plaster. So I teach on Mondays from 10 to 1. I teach my classes are set up to go year round because I make a living at this. I have to, a session here, a session there isn't going to support me every month. So I do, you renew at the beginning of every month, and I have in my class, I teach at the Sacramento Fine Arts Center. I've been teaching for them for about 10 years, 15 years. I've taught off and on their workshops and everything. I've had people come over there. And so about 15 years maybe. I taught for University Art. They're now gone. I taught for them for 15 at least years. I taught in my studio on Winding Way. I lived on Winding Way for about 9 years, and in Fair Oaks, and I taught there. I taught for college down in San Antonio. I taught for down in Orange County. There's a school there. I've taught up in Oregon. I just do workshops everywhere. And when my health was better, I did. Last year I had back surgery. And my knees are shot, so I'm not doing a whole lot as much. But I do teach locally. So this has my classes listed on it. It probably says, it names a Thursday class, and it says it's at University Art. That's actually Monday, so that's inaccurate. It's Monday at the Lincoln Gallery, the Arts League of Lincoln, from 10 to 1. So I'm there. And you have to sign up online for that one. Sacramento Fine Art classes, Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday is a portrait painting class. The other classes are open to just about anything. I'm teaching a color theory class. So let's talk about color theory. So I started out as a Renaissance painter, and Igor especially, he was like, he didn't even like Burnham, or he liked Rug, or he didn't. don't use those cooked colors, is what he tell me, you know? So I started out with these really dark Renaissance, monochromatic type almost, you know, portraits, and then I became a colorist somewhere in the middle of that. Like, it was about 96, I had my studio over on Fulton, and this lady walked into my studio. I thought maybe she's homeless, but I'm willing to talk to her, you know, and see what's going on with her, why was she drawn into my art? Her name was Vivian, and she was amazing. She came into my life. It's like the teachers that you need when you need them, they show up, right? This was Vivian. Turns out that she went to school in France, where Matisse went to school, same school. She had created wax sculptures through her time. She ended up bringing her portfolio in to prove to me who she was, because, you know, eventually I got a little bit worried about, you know, does she know what she's talking about? Not that we trust everybody, right? So what she did was and at that point, everybody had given me their paints, you know, they wanted me to grow because they saw I was talented. And so I was 37 at the time. And so she's like, she picked up my tube of paint and she put it on the white palette, and she'd take the palette knife and she'd pull it. Oh, yuck. She'd take my paint and throw it in the garbage. And wait, you know, so it's like, it was one of those things that it was an eye-opening experience. She'd find colors she loved. Oh, look at this, oh, and her excitement got me excited. And so my color took off for her. And then when I started teaching down in Texas, I got some chemists that were in my classes, and so we started analyzing what's in every tube of paint, you know, and the letters on the back, you can figure out what this paint is or where it came from, and what kind of oils mixed into it. So we got a little bit more complicated than most artists try to get. And all of that information is really kind of, it's important, because you could be using something that is poisonous, or it could be an endangered species. You may not want to use it for that reason. They've done away with most of those. It used to be that Indian yellow was made from cow urine, right? Caribou, specifically, is what I heard in the beginning. And then there was alizarin crimson. Did you know that alizarin crimson, the reason they put permanent on the label is because Daniel Wilcox wrote a book and he helped us to see exactly what was in a tube of paint, where that paint came from, where the pigment came from, and what was added to it. He helped us see light fastness, and the word fugitive means paints that will turn to brown within 10 years. So he told us which ones were fugitive. And so the first top on the list were sap green and alizarin crimson. They're fugitive. They turn to brown within 10 years. Well, once Daniel's book came out, the paint companies changed it, and you'll see it's called permanent alizarin crimson now. You know why it's permanent alizarin crimson? You still have that pigment in there that's going to turn brown within 10 years, but now it has quinacridone magenta in it. So now the quinacridone magenta is going to last for your centuries, and why waste your money on alizarin crimson? So there you go. That's your one lesson out of it. I'll give you. So that's one of the things I talk about in color theory. I take you through mixing color, trying to match color. I had an instinct about things from day one, and I learned really easily with art. And so my students would always say, "How do you know what to mix to get that color?" And so finally, I kind of you know, I just do things instinctually, and then my other side of my brain has to go, why did I do it? You know, why do I do that? You know, so it's kind of a using red, yellow, and blue theory. There's no, in fact, I don't allow you to talk about brown or gray. The only difference between brown and gray is that brown has orange in it. It has more red and yellow in it, and gray has more blue in it, but they both come from all three pigments being put together. So, when you start looking at color, like a color of a rug, that most people say, oh, it's brown. Well, I would say it's a dirty orange, because it's mostly orange. So I teach people how to look at a color and identify what primary or secondary it's closest to, and to help them to identify how to start mixing. Where do you start to get that color that you're mixing? And that's the problem most of the time, is where do you start and how much of the other colors do you add to them? So that's one of my things that I teach. There's a lot of stuff I teach about the temperature of light and shadow. Something that I definitely learned about from my portrait painters. The difference between how you handle, if your light is warm, your shadow's cool. If your light is cool, your shadows are warm. How to apply that in a painting, and then bouncing color. So all of that is in my color theory class, and it's coming up on the 8th and 9th of February at the Art Student League. Inspiration. So I was asked to talk about my journey and inspiration. So every week I put out a newsletter, and it gives them what I'm going to be teaching about in their class for the week. And plus I add, lately it's been, for the last year, I've been writing what inspires you. So I once heard that anything can make a great painting. It's how you paint it. So anything can be a good painting. And that came from Nelson Shanks. He was talking about, he would paint his studio box and have the ballet slippers up here, but it's just this messy paint box that he has underneath it. And it was a gorgeous painting. I've seen many people, I just did a slideshow for my students on Tuesday, and I do those at the Sacramento Fine Arts Center because we have a big screen to project on, and they can watch the slideshow up there. And it was on Mark Hansen. Now I have only taken, I had Igor out as my mentor. I drove all the way to Minnesota in my little sports car, got a flat tire in the middle of Iowa to go take a Mark Hansen class. If you see his work, he's a plein air painter, and he's incredible. He's a OPA signature member. He is a wonderful teacher as well. And I went back and had a class with him, and then I had a class with Nelson Shanks for a week. And he is the one guy who made the most amount of money per portrait that I knew of. So I was going to take his class. No surviving at this, And so he made $400,000 for his portrait of Princess Diana and one of Margaret Thatcher. He died a few years back. He is an incredible painter. If you have an interest in portraits, go look at Nelson Shanks' work. Mark Hansen is I did a slideshow on Wednesday. Let's see, what else can I talk about? Oh yeah. So inspiration can come from anywhere. It can be the way that a light shadow shows up on a wall. In fact, I love shadows. I love shadows. I mean, how many times are you looking at the edge of your house or someplace and you see this really interesting shadow shape and you want to incorporate it into a painting? That one's not as interesting. A plant shape against the wall of your house. I mean, that was one thing I always remember. I went to Carmel one time and I saw this painter, and I will never forget this painter. And there aren't many, unless there are portraits, I don't remember these painters much because I love portraits. But so I went to Carmel and there was this chair. It was a beach chair. This was a huge painting. And it was about the shadow of that chair going up the wall. And that was the subject of the painting. It wasn't the chair. It was that shadow and how they handled the shadow and the colors within the shadow. So I think that that whatever you are interested in, come up with unique ways to paint it. Come up with unique ways to put that into a painting. Don't try to paint like your teacher. Don't try to paint like your neighbor. Don't try to paint like somebody else. Paint like you. How would you approach it? How would you put it into that painting? I tell my students all the time, I don't want you to paint like me. And a lot of them want to do realism, and that's fine. And I will teach them everything I know about how I do things. But I want to inspire them to be the painter that they are, not the painter that I am. There's only going to be one me. There's going to be one you. All of these paintings are going to bring out a part of you. Which brings me to, when I worked for plaster schools for adults, I had these wonderful figure drawing classes. I love them. My students who took these classes with me always come back and say, I was in your classes, I love that class. Unfortunately, when I taught there, well, fortunately, I should say, when I taught there, we had the DeWitt Art Center. So the DeWitt Art Center had this fabulous classroom, and I could leave my modeling equipment, my stand and my backdrop and all of my stuff there. And it wasn't a problem with my body, moving all that equipment. This is why I'm in such bad shape, is because I've moved all this equipment all these years. But I did a 6-week class on how to just draw the body, the human body, starting with a stick figure, trying to figure out where the backbone is, where these joints are, where these joints are, and then building the human form. The next 6-week class was how to put light and shadow on that form and draw even more accurately. So that was all in drawing. Then the last 6-week class was about painting. So my goal was to get them capable of sitting in front of any model and any modeling shared model through and have a good painting at the end of the hour. So, or 2 hours, however long that was. So I kind of was like this drill sergeant a little bit. I do it teasingly. Okay, now you should have your stick in there. It's 5 minutes is up now, 10 minutes is up, you should have. And so, but the funny thing is that they ended up, you can always see their personalities in these. We have one model in the middle of the room, and every person you go around and you look at their work. And when you looked at their work, it was kind of like, if they were short, their model was shorter. If they were wide, their model was a little wider. There was a part of their personality that would show up in their artwork. And it was really interesting. And I have to tell you, my mother was a therapist. She was a marriage, family, child counselor, and my family needed it most. And my father was an engineer. And I ended up with this analytical mind that loves people, that loves to see how things work and how they're put together. And I love seeing, when I see somebody's art, and kind of looking at them and seeing the reflection of them in their art. And so that's what I try to encourage. I took an art class. I was 30, yes, I did. I took a little bit of college when I was 30. When I quit my job and became a full-time artist, I went back. I was going to American River College, and I had, what was I? Oh yeah, I had Melinda Barbera, who was teaching there, and she was also from Davis, and she was getting her art therapy degree. So she was back to do her master's and get her art therapy. And so she led us through these really fun exercises where, we got to choose, and this was advanced drawing, I think. We got to choose, well, it had to be more than drawing because we were painting too. Anyway, we had to choose an ism, like if we go through the Cubism period, then pick your favorite artist during that period. We go through the Impressionism, pick your favorite artist, do a painting that you think somebody would do in that style, or copy a master if you needed to. And it was very interesting. And we came to surrealism, and I did this painting. And I couldn't think of anything other than, I kept seeing this person who took off their hat and their hair is still in their hat. So it has a bald head. They took their glasses off and their eyes were still on the glasses. And so I had this head with a mouth and nose, and and this was all in analogous watercolor, right? And so I said, oh, now I have to do a background. So I did the background. I put in a window, a rug, and a chair. And I thought this, and every other one she'd go, oh yeah, look at this. This really relates to you, and you'd talk about why it relates to your personality or what you were going through or whatever. And on this one, I said, I don't even see myself in this. I don't know why. She goes, oh my gosh, look at this person comes home and they have to take their whole personality off. Look at how wide those windows are. This is like a cell. They're stuck in the cell. And that was the end of my marriage. It was like so real. It was like so good. So after that, I mean, I love seeing these things. I keep them to myself a lot, unless people are open to listening to them. But they're fun. It's really fun. I have a student right now who's painting robots, and I'm still trying to figure out how does that relate to her. But yeah, it's fun. So it's fun. Art is an expression of us. And when we put our art out there, it's like having a piece of our soul out there, being seen and being judged by other people. So when I do discussions at the end of the class, the last day of each month, we do a discussion where people voluntarily bring art up and we share. And the discussion goes like this. There are 4 things that make a good painting. First one is technique. That would include drawing, and paintbrush strokes or whatever. So technique, and then there's the use of color, and then there's composition. The last one is mythology, and that's what I just explained to you about the paintings. What do they mean? How many conversations can they evoke from somebody else? So the last one is always interesting. And so I'll put it up there and I'll say, okay, now we're going to talk about what we like about this. Sorry, I get hot really easy. But we're going to talk about what we like about these paintings. And then we're going to go into, if it was yours and you wanted to make it even better, because I do not want people to go away and not come back because others have been too critical of them. And not everybody's ready to hear criticism. And so be gentle, be kind, and tell us what you think you would do if it was yours and make it even better. So that's how I approach that. I'm talking about a little bit more of what I do. He's got a hair on that. So one of the things to be inspired, I was between my commissions for Shingle Springs, and most people don't get to see my Shingle Springs paintings because of the fact that I don't publicize them, because it's a private organization and it's their business, not mine. So what did I decide to do? I decided to paint the people who have inspired me. This is Soroya. Now I've gone back and found the paintings of these masters. Not every one of them will be somebody that you remember. These are great portrait painters. I will never forget when I walked into the Guggenheim in New York City and saw all of Soroya's paintings, the sheet maker. So he is a Spanish painter. So this is Joaquin Soroya. This is Mary Cassatt. So I looked for paintings that I could see their personality in. There's a lot of paintings of her from when she was younger. This one is Bertha Morisot. How many of you have seen Bertha Morisot's work? So my students were saying you're only painting men, so I came up with some women. And so this is Bertha Morisot. So I started doing all of these paintings, and this is John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent. Yeah. And then this one is Ilya Repin. He's probably not one you've heard of. When I was in Russia, I was exposed to their artists. Their artists are phenomenal. And Ilya Repin, if you get the opportunity, look up his work. He was a really masterful painter. I couldn't believe how good he was. And he was everywhere within their museums. But because of the Cold War, we didn't get to see a lot of their painters. Now that they're being bad again, we don't get to see a lot more of them now. So Ilya Repin is that fellow. Now I do pastels. Pastels have become, so during my career in lulls, and there are lots of lulls when you're making a living as a full-time artist, I decided that I was going to go to Petco and bring my printer, take my camera, and I was going to do 20-minute sketches of animals for them. And so I did a few, and I charged a little bit. And it raised some money for that Christmas that I needed. Christmas is my slow season. Not too many people. It's like buying furniture when you buy a portrait. They're $3,000 for my oil portraits. So I decided to come up with something that other people could afford. And I started doing pet portraits. they're now, I'm not satisfied with 20 minutes anymore. They're now more like an hour, hour and a half. And they are pastel still. This is one I need to ship off to the person who hired me to do this one. I love pastels. I have to say that pastels and oils are both my favorite. I am primarily an oil painter. I took up watercolors before I quit my job, when I was 30, and I felt like I'd done it in a previous life and it wasn't challenging enough, so I quit doing watercolors, went back to oils, and I decided I could charge more for oils too, since I was gonna make a living at it. I don't know where I got that thinking. So I ended up going and in our plein air journeys, this is the Tower Theater in downtown Sacramento. It's quite an iconic location. I did a lot of plein air paintings. I've done at least 4 of them. I sold them all, so I went, Sacramento Fine Arts Center has a deck of cards they're selling for promotion. They got different artists to paint a different card for each one of their, for each one of the cards in the deck. And so I repainted this in the studio. And so this is actually a studio painting, after the fact that I painted it so many times. And then this is my son. You like that big hair? We have a lot of Irish Scottish, and he doesn't know what to do with it because it's so wild, and so he shaves the side and he gets this big thing up here. He's an electrician. It kind of looks like an electrician's hair, right? And he's a commercial electrician. In fact, he built the school. Was part of building the school in Lincoln. I think he was foreman on that job. So, and then I do landscapes, of course, with my students, and I do them as demos. So this was a class demo one day, just from a photo that I had taken. I love clouds, so I was trying to decide what I could bring and what was light enough to bring. I think I've gone through all of it. Any questions? Oh, flowers, sorry, yes. So all of this realism. And I've gone to galleries, and I do palette knife paintings too as well, and I sculpt. I've done bronzes. I sculpt in oil-based clay, and I have some really heavy, I thought about bringing it too heavy, oil-based bronzes. Again, I'm getting arthritis really bad, the big thumbs, so you can't really do a lot of that kind of work. So I quit doing that. I've only done probably about 7 or 8 sculptures, and bronzes are expensive. So last year, I had these huge canvases that I collected over the years and a small home. So last year I was going, okay, what am I going to do with these canvases? And I'm talking that tall and that wide is my biggest one. That's one of my next ones. And so when the politics happened, and I can't stand politics, and they scare me actually, because we've seen all the stuff that's happened in the world. My reaction, my inspiration for these, believe it or not, were politics, because I didn't want to have anything to do with them, and I wanted something pretty to make me happy. So through the years, if you were one of my students, you knew I said I don't paint flowers. I just don't paint flowers. And so all of a sudden within the last year, I said, I'm going to paint flowers. So, I guess I'm one of those people that said, will never say no to everything forever. But yeah, so I started doing these. This is my 8th painting. They sell well. People love to have cheery things in their houses. It gives me something to do that's fun and entertaining in between the hard work, which are these. People tend to buy texture and color, unless they want to have a portrait painted, and then that specific thing they can kind of have me do otherwise. But so I try to put, and texture, as far as texture goes, you can see I've had a hard time getting texture in my work. It's been a lifelong journey, right? I do palette knife paintings, and I teach my students how to do palette knife paintings, and those sell immediately. What is it? These things take much more work, and then I do those palette knife paintings, and everybody wants texture and color. And you go to galleries, and that's what they have: texture and color, texture and color. So I'm great at drawing. I'm great at the analytical, how to figure out what it is. I had one student one time that she kept talking about the rabbit in her photo. And I'm kind of the photo detective. I actually teach phones too. But she kept talking about this rabbit, and she's painting a clown, and I'm going, what crap. And so I finally come around and I look at her photograph, I go, Mary, that's a hand in a glove. You know, so it's like one of my things that I have to do is be the detective. So this stuff is just fun. It's large, it's oversized, and it's joyful. And so when I put this up in between all of my serious work in my house, it just finished it off, and I can see why they do like that. And something like this can hang in many different directions. I like it this direction, but I also, people like it, which way is it? This way, I think, that way, yeah. So they're fun, and I've been selling a lot of G clays of these as well. So through the years, as an artist, there's no answer to how to sell. People asked about that. There is no answer. I hate asking when somebody asks me, what should I sell for? I just kind of say, oh, well, I started at this, and I tell them where I was. But it's personal. I used to have a theory with my artists at my gallery. If you want to sell them for $20,000, don't start at $30 for your paintings now. So you need to go according to what your projections are. Well, I got up to $6,000 per portrait. I was at $3,000 prior to that. And then the stock market went down, and I lost my gallery. And I had to, that was in 2001, and I have not changed my price since. I sell well at $3,000, and that's what I sell them for. I haven't raised my price since. I just enjoy selling, and I like doing the portraits, and I'm happy at that price. So, any questions? No? Okay. Well, I think that's it. Thank you for inviting me. And you're welcome to come up and get some flyers if you are interested in classes or color theory.
Can we see your book?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes.